Welcome to the Leadership and Yoga podcast hosted by me, Shauna Kruger. And on this podcast, I'll be bringing you interviews with exceptional leaders in the yoga world alongside trainings and tips so you can experience true breakthroughs and help others do the same. I never say the number, so I'm going to start by saying the number. Episode 163. Can you believe it? Public speaking, procrastination, pressure, and approach avoidance. And if you don't know what approach avoidance is, I didn't either, but this concept was a game changer for me. Welcome into the Leadership and Yoga podcast. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to take a little sip of my ginger tea that I have here with me today. Out of also my Leadership and Yoga colored mug, which I found at the Goodwill. It was made in Germany. So it's not special order, but I felt pretty special when I found it. Today's episode is one that I feel like has been a major learning curve for me in both teaching yoga and in podcasting. So it's the perfect topic. I don't think I've covered it since maybe episode 5 or way back. In the way back, I covered a lot about stage fright and about this kind of feeling of being under pressure while public speaking. And I've mentioned it, of course, here and there. It's interwoven into absolutely everything we do as expressive creatures that we are. But today's episode is entirely dedicated to it. And so let me start by telling you that you can do this. Whatever it is that you want to do, that little voice, that thing that was in the back of your head that kind of made you click on this episode, I'm here to tell you that you can do it, but you need to be able to believe enough to try. You need to be able to believe enough to try. And that's what I'm here to do today, is to help you believe a little bit more. The things that unfold when you start to believe in something new are nothing short of magic. And I don't mean that lightly or in a silly manner. I mean it seriously, because the fact that I'm sitting here before you today was because I was able to fundamentally change some of the principal beliefs that I held to be true about myself, which were ultimately stories that, yes, were adopted and created, but were also things that I was able to let go. And we'll talk about some of the ones that I am still letting go of as well. But before we get into the episode and the agenda and all of that, I want you to know that I sponsor my own episodes, my own podcast at this point in time, at least. And so I would love if you would take a moment to please drop me a rating and to subscribe to my podcast. When you subscribe to my podcast and share my show, it is what enables all of this to be happening. And so I know that it's probably like beyond annoying at this point if you're a listener and you've already subscribed and you've already rated and you've already shared. You're like, stop saying it. But I'm like, please, if you're listening, I know there are some of you listening who have not rated my podcast, and I would really appreciate it if you would please rate my podcast. Okay, before I scare you off. The other thing I want to tell you is that I am, for the first time ever, hosting my own solo retreat. This is an adventure style retreat. So this is actually, I've been using the words most affordable retreat, and I want to, I know, as I've been told, that that's not necessarily the correct way to refer to that, because it is not like I'm saying that this is affordable for one and for all. But I promise you that in this retreat, I've run the numbers forward and backwards to keep the group at 10 of us and also to make it the most accessible that I can. And yeah, this is something that I'm very excited about. It's in January of next year, and it's going to be in Montezuma, Costa Rica, by the ocean. This is the place that Simone and I got married in. It's the place where I hosted my very first retreat ever. But it's also going to be the home of my first solo retreat. And this is special to me because what I want to do is to share time with each and every one of you who wants to come and to share time with me and a like-minded group of people. There's not going to be a photographer for the first time ever. It's going to be really a time that I'll encourage you to step back and to tune in and to disconnect and to remove yourself essentially from these patterns and these demands and these outside inputs that we have constantly coming in. And the whole idea of the retreat is this phrase that I kept saying to other people of this desire of like, man, I crave going back to the basics. Like I want real in-person connection. I know that some of the most meaningful moments of my life have unfolded when I was truly present and when, at the same time I was present to something that felt really magical. And so that is the goal of this experience. It's you have to take a small fast ferry, like a footboat, where they literally haul your stuff over water, and you've got to get your feet wet and get on the boat and come across to the Nicoya Peninsula, which is a blue zone where people live longer than anywhere else in the world. It's super rugged. It's very, very lively with wildlife of all kinds. It's a special place. It's where the jungle meets the sea, and I'll encourage you, if you haven't queued up my last solo episode, to queue up the episode that is an immersive special, and it's called Simplicity. So if you want to queue that up as well, you can hear also more about the entire idea of the retreat in that episode or in the link in the show notes. Okay, thank you for listening to that. And let's get into this show on public speaking that you're here for in the first place. So, public speaking has felt like, to me, the perfect storm to just make my skin crawl with the kind of anxiety that I cannot physically control. I don't know about you, but there's certain things where, and I try not to say this as much anymore, but I'll say like, oh, that makes me anxious. But then there are the things that like make me anxious, capital A, anxious. I'm like shaking. I'm really not able to control my bodily functions. And that is terrifying to me. So if you've ever experienced that, you're not alone. If you haven't experienced that, that's great. And I'm super happy for you. And I'm also here to say, like, that really also means that you can do this, that you can step up in this way, and you can use your voice in this way that I know deep down you've been thinking about using your voice. And it's going to be in a very effective manner. The other day, I was sitting by the window having dinner with my husband, and all of a sudden, a storm started to arrive. And this storm started out like, kind of a normal storm. It was raining a ton here in Texas and Austin. We don't get a ton of storms. I don't really know. This is my first time. This is my first year going through the storm season like this. But this one progressed at a rate that just blew my mind. And the reason I'm going to tell you about it is because this is exactly the feeling that I know takes over us in these moments of panic. I've had lots of people, even on the podcast, who you would assume like have it all together and they've made it and they're this and they're that and they're teaching all around, but they've described this same exact moment of kind of a takeover of just the fear, and where you feel like you lose a little bit of control and you don't really even know what way is up, what way is down. You're just kind of like in full on survival mode, and it's suddenly not about how to serve and best impact the people in front of you and how to bring your, highest ideas through into words in the most simple manner that a child could understand and that everybody is clapping and it's great. It's more of like, holy shit, I need to survive. Like I need to survive this storm that I have going on right now. And so this storm hits, like this physical storm hits, and it starts to hail. And as it's hitting, I see this emergency notice on my phone, and it says, caution, take shelter, storm warning, hail the size of baseballs, like move away from windows. And I was like, oh my God, like hail the size of a baseball. This is crazy. And I was trying to move away from the window, but at the same time, like I almost could not move away because I couldn't see anything out the front window, but I could see from the side window a bit on the balcony. I could see these just massive pieces of hail, and the noise was insane. It was absolutely just full on adrenaline, disbelief from one moment to the next, the way that this thing hit. And it was incredibly noisy, and we were just basically in shock for about 10 minutes. And a piece of the ice, the hail, like smashed through, made a hole in our window, like an actual hole in our window. And 10 minutes before, I was just sitting there like, la da da, little candlelight dinner, just like, so how was your day? Well, my day was good. Oh, my day was good as well. And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. And the way that this storm hit me, I wanted to make this reference really clear that in these moments, what happens after them is that you genuinely feel really good. You feel really good because you made it through it. And one of my favorite phrases that I've ever learned in this human life is that familiarity beats fear. Familiarity beats fear. And the nature of the things that we cannot predict, which is life as a whole, is very difficult. We want to make these patterns, we want to analyze, what are these people thinking about me? Like, what is their facial expression saying? But when you can understand that just going through the experience of the public speaking or of approaching the thing that you've been procrastinating forever and ever, that you feel genuinely embarrassed now that you've put it off for so long, whether it's a person you need to respond to or a bank account that needs to be opened for your business, just me, anybody else. But these things, once you go through with them, even though that moment of being in the storm, it feels really, really scary. Afterwards, you feel amazing. And so I want to preface it just with that. And I'll tell you that the three things that we're really going to talk about today are exactly as the title says. We're going to go through this idea of approach avoidance. What is approach avoidance? How can you take back the reins? We're going to talk about procrastination. We're going to talk about the pressure that you put on yourself and the pressure that you feel in those moments. And you notice I'm touching, if you're watching the video on Spotify, this part of like the solar plexus, right? In this core center where I actually allow myself to touch this part of my belly, my upper belly, right? Kind of between the top of the rib cage here when I am feeling that amount of pressure and I'm feeling that nervousness, and remind myself that these are the things that I'm here to experience. And I don't want to be stagnant. I want to be okay with growth. And at the same time, I want to give myself grace. So that's the perspective that I'm coming at this episode today with. It's all about the ways that we sabotage something. Blah, getting a little tongue tied around sabotaging my ability to say sabotage. But we sabotage speaking our best in front of other people. And the sneaky way that we sabotage ourselves before we even get up to speak, and how we can be a lot more prepared. Because I'm not here to tell you to like just send it, just do it, just launch into it. What can go wrong? Like, weather the storm. If it's terrible and it sucks and you were unprepared, oh well. Absolutely not. I'm here to make you believe in yourself enough to have the courage and to have the inspiration and to have the energy to properly prepare yourself and to gain the clarity that you need to have in order to communicate effectively as possible. There's one other story. I'm trying to think of how I could even lead into that. Basically, I need to tell you one other story that we're going to talk about throughout this episode that was also beyond the storm. This was an actual example of a time that I failed and I froze up and I completely avoided speaking in a moment that I really wanted to speak. And what happened was that I was cooking lunch and Simone was outside talking to one of his relatives. And I was somewhat aware of that. I was kind of listening, kind of not. And if you know me, you know that I speak Spanish. It's not my first language though. And while I do speak it fluently. I definitely, of course, don't feel quite as comfortable expressing my emotions in Spanish, especially when I'm not 100% certain what I'm hearing over a scratchy voice call with, somebody in another country. So what happens is I'm minding my own business, cooking my lunch, and then Simone, bless his heart, comes over and is like, "Hey, like this is my so and so." I'm not going to share exactly their name, but this is this person. And this person, by the way, is not just one of his relatives. This is the relative that he frequently cites to be the person that had the most impact on his life. The person that in the book that he's writing is like one of the main people who changed everything and who is incredibly wise and intelligent and deep and meaningful and present and all of these things. And he just puts the phone in front of my face. And this person is just looking at me and starts to tell me all of these compliments about how happy he is that I am Simone's life partner and how, what a wonderful woman I am. And just basically like throwing this string of really eloquent, beautiful things about how like life is a journey and that we're travelers together. And I'm listening to all of this and I can feel my body just start to think about what I'm going to respond back. And the pressure arises because this is a person who also doesn't have Wi Fi in their home. This is not a person that I can just call back anytime. This is like a special opportunity to speak to this person. And he stops speaking, and literally all I can feel myself say is just the classic, like, sí, sí, oh, gracias, sí, like, how are you? Just this very shallow surface level. I felt like my whole ability to communicate any of my feelings or any of the things that I might have wanted to say just went out the window. I was completely put on the spot, and I was so wrapped up in saying the perfect thing and what I could ever respond to that, that I ended up not saying anything. And I actually turned away and went into the bathroom. And the minute that I left, I just started to cry. And I just broke down like in this sobbing, this tearful sobbing embarrassment, frustration with myself. And it's not unlike things I've felt in other areas of my life where I've like really wanted to do a good job with something and have felt like my public speaking anxiety or my procrastination did not allow me to prepare properly. And I had felt all of these things before, but I really felt that I was beyond this. I thought I had mastered the art of at least saying something and not being worried if I look like a fool. And who cares if I mess up that grammatical thing? And all of it just came crashing down on top of me. And so, long story short, I was super upset about it. I tried to excuse it away on 100 different things. And then ultimately, what I ended up doing was calling back like 10 minutes later, like clearing my eyes and just toughening up and focusing and saying something, even though I wanted to write something, I could send it later and this and that. And I wasn't going to do that. Like it was now or it was never. And I knew that. And I really had to push myself to take a few deep rounds of breath and say, like, okay, wait a second, like, let me speak because otherwise I might not get this out. Like, I'm sorry, but like, this is what I want to say. And I didn't say it before, not because I was distracted or not interested, but because it was hard for me to express myself in Spanish and in that moment. And that is something that I'm not gonna forget for a long time because I felt it, so deeply. And I hope that you can feel it and that it's coming across as I say it. Maybe you can think of an example in your life like that. And whether or not in that moment you were actually able to step up and do it, it doesn't mean that going forward that you're doomed, to be stuck in that same pattern. And you don't need to look back on that example and be like, see, like, this is proof that I can't. And that, this is proof that you're actually not that good at Spanish and that maybe you should just go back and, maybe you shouldn't speak to anybody because obviously you can't communicate your thoughts. It's like, no, don't use that past experience to justify. Use that experience to make yourself feel a little bit disturbed and like, yeah, I don't want to feel like that again. And that can be avoided by facing my fear, recognizing, holding my stomach, like, oh my God, I feel like I'm on a roller coaster right now. But whew, okay, I gotta say, let me take a breath in between each and every word if I need to, but I'm gonna get this out. And once you start to get it out, familiarity beats fear. So, approach avoidance, the concept of approach avoidance. If you are avoiding anything in your life, if you're sabotaging your success in any area, it's because you are experiencing this approach avoidance. We associate different amounts of pain and pleasure with everything in our lives. And when we have an avoidance to something, it's because we have a mixed level of pain and pleasure. So, an example of this could be like a romantic relationship. This is a classic example for so many of us, or even a friendship, right? Where you're starting to get along really well with this person and you're enjoying that. Like that brings you pleasure. But there's this fear of the pain. There's the fear of, okay, if I lose this person or if I lose this connection or if I have to be alone again and if I let myself really fall for this person. And so you're going to start essentially sabotaging the progress that you make if you associate more pain with this relationship than you do pleasure with the relationship. It's the same thing, like for me, an example, setting up a business banking account. I knew that I really needed to do that for a long time. And it brought me great joy to think about, having my finances not as much of a mix up disaster, to be quite frank with you, right? But I had this extreme amount of pain associated with the process of like changing my business address and then going to the bank and then setting up the thing. And I didn't know where the LLC information was. And I didn't, know if I filed the appropriate paper. And I felt like it was this infinite number of steps. And for a long time, I didn't do that. I didn't open that bank account for probably like a year past when I should have because I was associating so much pain with the action of going forward with opening the account. And so, what determines your behavior is which pain is more intense. Is the pain of doing it more intense, or is the pain of not doing it more intense? And we tend to fixate on the pain of doing what this task at hand is more than remembering kind of like the opportunity cost. Like what happens if we don't do it, right? If you're choosing something, you're not choosing the other. And when we choose not to do something, we choose not to stand up to raise our hand in that moment that we really want to, we choose to, repeatedly silence ourselves for fear of not having it all together and not knowing exactly how it's going to come across when we speak. There's a really, really heavy weight to that. There's a great taxation upon our soul, I would dare say. And I don't know if I heard that from somebody else, but I'm sure I did because it sounds too familiar. But I really, really think that in the moment that you decide that you're going to move your focus from the short term pain to the long term pain, as dark as that seems, when you realize that you can choose your focus and you are in control of that, essentially, that is when everything can change for you. In order to change what you link pain and pleasure to be, you just have to change your focus. And where focus goes, energy flows. It's sort of this self-fulfilling cycle. And you must decide right now. I mean, right now as I'm speaking, because if not now, then when? But decide right now that you control your mind and that you can choose what you focus on. You don't need to let this short-term blinding pain deter you from the things that matter most to you. So if you can change the focus from the pain of doing the thing to the pain of not doing the thing, and you can also change the focus of the pleasure of not doing the thing, because in short term speaking, it gives you great pleasure to just sit here nice and cozy and like, yeah, nah, I'm not, I'm just gonna think about it. You're gonna take action someday? Yeah, yeah, someday, not today. Today, today I'm just gonna enjoy the not doing the thing. If you can change that to focus on the pleasure that you will feel, maybe even 10 minutes from now, in building that first little spark of momentum that you really need. It has blown my mind so many times where I can feel so down and so, disappointed in my progress, and so like the things that I'm creating and the things that I'm saying are just not turning out right. And then I can somehow will myself to get up and to listen to some good music and to just sit down and write something. Even if I'm writing for the wastebasket, I'm writing something that I'm like, oh, even as I write, like, this is probably going to suck because everything else I've written lately just seems to suck. You write it anyways. And then at the end, you're like, oh my gosh, like this. You see this? I did this. This is pretty good. This is pretty good. So, yeah, think about that, how you can reprogram the way that you're thinking about this in terms of the approach of the actual thing, because 9 times out of 10, you don't need to fight yourself for the entire time that you're taking action. Let's use the example of going to a yoga class on a day that you feel just like really worn out, you feel like your brain is wired, you feel frustrated, you feel too busy, and you end up just kind of willing yourself like, all right, swing the legs off the bed, put on shoes. And then you reach eventually what we call a go point. And when you get to your go point, there's no turning back. I know very few of us who would leave in the car out onto the street and then turn back around, repark the car, go back inside, take off your shoes, and get back in the bed. A lot of us, the go point is like that swinging the legs out of the bed, or it's putting on the shoes, or it's um, essentially just like snapping a finger and just saying, all right, just got to snap, just got to get up, just got to do it. Tony Robbins says that all the time. You just got to snap. And I think it's hilarious because a lot of times, like, I don't like that, those kind of like, just like muscle up and do it. But I think that at the end of the day, you've got to get the ball rolling. The whole weight of inertia lies in that first initial push. But then once the thing is rolling, you can be mindful about it and you can enjoy it and you can be slow and you can take your pauses and you can take whatever you need. But there is difficulty in the beginning, always. Procrastination. All right, this is part 2 of 3. Look at that. We're zooming along. Procrastination. My hot take on this whole thing about public speaking and knowing what to say and finding the words and speaking to the camera and all of that is that it isn't actually that difficult at least. It's definitely not impossible to gain clarity on what it is that you want to say. So it's really not that hard to prepare your thoughts. A lot of times you'll find that you have a lot of thoughts and you have a lot of things to say and you have more clarity on things than you think that you do. But what is hard is to sit down and convince yourself that the thing is important enough to prepare for. And sometimes it's on the opposite end. It's so important and you've made it into such a big deal that you still can't approach it because now it's such a big deal that you don't even know where to start. The pain of not coming up with the perfect thing or saying something that's good enough, quote unquote, causes us to avoid the preparation, aka to procrastinate it and to put it off. This is intricately interwoven, of course, into the whole theme of avoidance. But remember that choosing not to choose is still a choice. And so in procrastination, you are essentially giving up your freedom. That is the way that I have come to look at procrastination is not a freedom giving thing. It's not a, oh, I'm just going to enjoy here. I'm just going to lounge here. I'm relaxing, right? And I am all for relaxation and slowing down and presence. If you've listened to any of my episodes, especially lately, you know that. But what I want to make very clear is that waiting for the energy, waiting to have the energy to do the thing you feel like you should do is a dangerous game to play because a lot of times doing that thing will give you the energy that you are looking for. And so this is not to say that you should just jump up and start, giving a speech, go on Instagram live and, not be prepared and not be in a great state of mind. But this is more like do that shaking exercise that you like, or that tapping exercise, or do a Wim Hof breath work, or, sometimes do the opposite of what you feel like doing in those states. So the root of the cause of how harmful procrastination can be, and I feel like I'm like really pronouncing that very proper procrastination, is that it's we're not able to motivate ourselves to sit down and to gain that clarity and to just get to the writing, even if it's writing for the wastebasket in a certain phase. But in these moments where we're not willing to sit down and we're not willing to give it the time of the day, we're really being that kid in school who's like, it's not cool to try as a cover up for the fact that trying feels like a really big ask for them, or they don't actually think that they're very good at it. And so they have this attitude of like, oh, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. It's dumb anyways. It's whatever. So I'm not going to try. That's the attitude that we're really having when we don't pay attention to the fact that every single thing that we put out into the world, it's actually really meaningful. Like, we're taking up space in people's minds and people's days. And that's not to put pressure on you. We'll talk about what kind of pressure is appropriate, but to kind of inspire you and to give you that spark and to take back that power and say, yeah, I mean, every single conversation that you have, you are influencing people. And every single conversation that you have no idea. That might be the thing that that person needed in that particular moment to move forward. Even when we're experiencing the burden of possibility that is speaking, and speaking is such a burden of possibility. That's why I think we feel like we cannot even approach it, is because we know that it's limitless, it's infinite in what we could say and give our attention and, put importance on. But when you have to speak up, when you have an opportunity to speak in public, to teach a class, or even just to, raise your hand in that moment that you don't usually raise your hand at work, it gives you the gift of figuring out what you do have clear and what you have unclear, what you do believe and what you don't believe. And moving through life with a general sense of what you think rather than what other people think, because you're going to hear a lot of really, really convincing people. And this is something that David Swenson said in the interview when I interviewed him. It's one of my favorite interviews I have on this podcast, where he talks about why dogmatic and super charismatic leaders have so many followers, is because you don't have to think. You just hear these people speaking with such conviction that you see that and you go like, "Oh yeah, like that, I mean, that's pretty convincing. Like that's pretty cool. I'm just going to follow that. I don't even need to think now." And so when you take back that power and when you speak and when you become part of the conversation, and this is like one of my principal values of the Leadership and Yoga podcast, is the belief that all of us are leaders. Each and every one of us are leaders. And you take back that power and that sense of like, okay, well, I'm at least leading myself. What does self-leadership look like for me in this moment? Your voice has so much to do with that. And taking that power back changes the entire narrative, because shortly after that, you're no longer just drinking the tea of somebody else. You're no longer just steeping in the messages of other people. And even what I'm telling you right now is a message, right? And you're choosing, as you hear this, whether or not to believe me, to trust me, to, be in conversation with me like a friend about this and to resonate, with what I'm saying. And if you don't, then you don't. But I'm just trying to get you into the conversation. That is my number one goal. You've heard me say it 1,000 times before, but your dreams are made for people like you. There's a reason why you have them. There's a reason why you have these little whispers in the back of your mind that you will either someday follow and stop avoiding, or you'll spend a lifetime pushing down and using vital life force energy to keep them buried away, and then wonder why you don't have energy and why you don't feel like doing anything and why things feel really terrible. So, yeah, that's what I want to say on procrastination. And I also want to say that if the avoidance factor is like you really feel like something is going to leap out from underneath the bed and bite you, then get it over with. Get it over with. The storm is going to hit. Like that the storm is going to hit. You cannot hide and you cannot run from it forever. So turn and face it. And the idea of familiarity beats fear rings really true here. And there's something that I want to say specifically about fear and the power of our voices. So sound is medicine, and it exists essentially so that our body can release tensions. If you think about it, we don't have to think when we laugh. We also don't have to think when we get spooked or we get scared. That sort of like gut instinct that the body releases tension through sound. And every single animal has a sound. Sound is how we move through the instinctual reptilian part of our brain, through these instincts that we have deep within us, like undesired fear. And there are three basic parts of the brain. We have our neocortex, we have our limbic system, we also have our brainstem. And if you look at the neocortex here, we have the idea of thoughts to get through that part of the brain. Limbic system, we have the feeling of emotions and feelings. And in the brainstem, in these sort of automatic reactions and responses and everything that's responsible for in our body, we have vibration to get through that portion of the brain. Vibration in terms of the movement of our physical body. That's why it feels so good to literally shake out the stress, move out the stress that we have and the tension that we have in our body, but also the vibration of the beautiful sound of our voice. And so if you close your eyes and you just think about you're going up a roller coaster and you're like leaned way back and you're like tick, 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 and you're just getting closer and closer to the top, and you can start to feel all of these feelings happening in your body. And then right at the top, there's this moment where it's like really slow and you hear this clunk, and then whoosh, and you just drop and you're dropping and you're dropping, and then this feeling comes out of you. It feels like you want to go like, "Wah!" And it feels nice, right? So when you can think about your voice in those moments of fear, because most of us, it's not everybody. I so envy. No, I don't. I'm happy I experienced this so that I can talk about it. But truthfully, I always think, like, wouldn't it be nice just to be fearless in that way? But it's so normal to experience fear in certain moments in what you're saying, because you might not be 100% prepared. You might not be able to be 100% prepared. It might be in front of people that you care a lot what they think about you, and you're not sure what they think about certain topics. And all you can do is speak your truth at the end of the day and do your best to be as simple and as, well thought out with your words. But you also, at a certain point, have to trust the frequency beneath them. You have to trust the frequency of your words and what you're saying, and understand that the fear of using your voice is like fear protecting itself, because now you know that the very act of using your voice is an instrument for getting through to that part of your brain that has the fear. It's like chipping away with an ice pick at the center of fear. And so fear doesn't want you to listen to your voice. That's why nobody likes to listen to their voice at first. Instead of fear towards public speaking, think of your voice in this moment as an instrument to get familiar with. Think of your voice as an instrument. It is an instrument that you will learn how to play. And so part of what you may be procrastinating regarding public speaking is listening to yourself. And if you do teach yoga classes and you have not recorded a class before and listen to what you sound like, do that. Do that immediately. Even if you just need to put up a little voice note recording, you don't need to ask permission to film people or something like that. So much can be revealed to you in how you're saying different things. The intonation, how do your sentences end? Is every single sentence sounding like it's a question? When you speak, is every single thing going up at the end like you're just not really sure what you're saying? And these things are so obvious, but also the pauses. Where do you put pauses? And my best advice at the end of the day, because I know that can be a lot to face, is to just remember that this is a practice. My best advice is to talk like you're talking to a friend, like you would send a friend a voice note. If you want to move even beyond that, kind of like the third tier here on what you could look into in terms of using your voice as an instrument, would be to look at what captivating speakers do. Listen to people that captivate you when they speak, and start to understand what patterns are they using. Because what I have found, especially as I start to ask people who I admire how they deliver, I admire how they deliver a yoga class, how they deliver a speech, how they speak in general, is that they know what they're doing. And that doesn't mean it's fake or that it's acting and that it's not real. Our voice is the most delicate, unique, memorable stamp of our existence. And it brings unparalleled connection. So your voice deserves your time and your attention. Part number 3, pressure. At the root of any pressure that you're feeling about being good enough, about saying the right thing, perfect example was how I felt so much pressure in that moment where I could not respond to this family member the way that I wanted to, was this root issue of worthiness, being good enough. And in this case, it was with my Spanish, and it was also with that I was frustrated in that moment that I couldn't think of something as profound as what this person had just told me. And so what I want to say about worthiness is it's sneaky. You might not really understand it. You might be listening to me and say like, no, like I feel pretty good and solid with who I am. It's just that there's a disconnect when I go to show up and to speak. But see if you can say I to any of the following: not wanting people to see that you're not actually sure, not wanting to speak up because you don't feel like you have all of the answers, feeling like someone else has said it better than you already, feeling like you don't actually have that much value to add, not trusting your voice or what will come out, not trusting your body to be calm and collected or to just make it through, wanting to make sure that whatever you do share doesn't make you look like a fool or feel publicly humiliated, not wanting to get canceled or say the wrong thing, not feeling like you have enough energy or inspiration to get clear on your message, having too many ideas or thoughts on your mind. If you, like me, can say I to any of these, I want you to look into and remember your innate sense of worthiness. Part of dropping the facade, part of what just puts so much pressure on yourself is the fact that you're needing a sense of validation from what you say. And I know that is so hard because we all want our things to be impactful. We want what we share to go out into the world. When we yell into the void, we want to hear something back. We want to be in communication. And that's fine. And that's great. But when you do that from a sense of already feeling worthy and already feeling proud of yourself for sitting down and having written out something that feels meaningful, and to be writing a book or to be working on your podcast or to be, uh, I don't know, preparing a class that's intricately themed around something that you think is really cool, then you're coming at it already from a space of presence, in a space of being connected to the magic of life through what you've created. And you're not needing other people's reactions or laughter or smiles to bring you that magic. And the funny thing about it is that it's such a it's such a touchy subject, because once you are able to truly come at it with that magic energy, it's like the laughters and the interest from other people is like the exclamation point on it. It almost always follows. Not always, but it does in a lot of cases. Something that gives me peace is also the fact that while we're trying to avoid embarrassment a lot of times, every embarrassing story is so valuable. It's like comic gold. It's gold for using in job interviews as long as it's appropriate. It's gold for using in your podcast, for sharing about it, for just telling a story to your friends. And you can sort of cognitively tether this discomfort and this embarrassment that you may be experiencing in the present moment to the feeling of your future growth, and understanding that, wow, I'm feeling super uncomfortable, and that means that I am super growing. And that's so basic and so cheesy, but I felt like it was important to say. So I want to end by saying that there's a difference between operating from the sense of outcome, where you're fixated on how did it go? How did it land? And that's important to think about for sure. It is really important. But there's also the feeling of just being satisfied with your efforts. And when you're satisfied with your efforts, you can feel it. It's like after a day of hard work, and you might not be able to see the direct outcome of your work, but you feel like, man, yeah, I was productive today, and I also took rest, and I also made time to get a coffee with that friend. And today, I I tip my hat to my progress, to just the feeling of putting in the work today. And so the stakes are high when it comes to public speaking and to facing the avoidance and the procrastination and the pressure that you feel regarding this subject, but the stakes are not high in the way that you think that they are. You're most likely artificially inflating the stakes being high around you not looking like a fool and you being good at this and that. But the stakes are high because the world needs your words. The world needs your message. It needs to hear what you have to say. It doesn't want you to stay silent because you've made the stakes too high for your own importance. Don't think about that. Like, why would you think about that when there's all of these things out there that could happen because of the fact that you stand up? So the stakes are high because the world needs your ideas. And remember that, I think if you're listening today, especially if you're listening still at this point after my little bit of rambling that I had today, you're listening for a reason, and there's something that's tugging at you that you feel like you want to do as a result of this episode. And so I'm not here to give you a challenge or one, little piece of advice, but I do want to recap just so that we can mentally recall what we've talked about today, and you can hopefully take an appropriate little action, a little spark, a little momentum as a result of this episode. So, we talked about at the beginning approach avoidance, where you're essentially attributing so much pain to even getting started that you're not thinking about all of the pain that will happen if you don't get started at all. You're not thinking about the pleasure that will come from getting started. So maybe you can look a little bit about your approach avoidance if you're feeling like you're really not able to get started at all. In procrastination, similarly, we talked about the idea that procrastination is not freedom. Procrastination and choosing not to choose is still making a choice. And if fear is one of the main reasons that's coming up for your procrastination, and you're feeling like as you walk closer to the bed, something's going to jump out and grab you underneath, get it over with and just see what that experience is actually like. And don't put it off for so long that you're not actually able to get the experience that you need in order to have the familiarity that will eventually beat the fear. And also remember that your voice is an instrument for approaching the fear as well. And then finally, we talked about the pressure and the unnecessary pressure that we do put on ourselves around showing up to speak. And remember that the stakes are not high because you need to be absolutely perfect and never look like a fool. But the stakes are high because the world needs to hear what you have to say. And I want to hear what you have to say as well. So leave me a comment on the bottom of this episode of the microphone. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, your morning, your evening, whatever time it is there where you are listening. And I will catch you in the next episode. Ciao, ciao. If you enjoyed this episode of the Leadership in Yoga podcast, please take a moment to drop me a rating and subscribe. Also, if you're able to share this podcast with the world, it is greatly appreciated. Thank you.